My son's tablet had a cracked screen, so I took it to that little shop on the corner I've gone to for years. A few hours later, the repairman called me, his voice trembling, and his warning sent a chill right through me, freezing the blood in my veins. Be careful of your son. My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm a 72-year-old widow living in Charleston, and that was the moment I realized the home I'd spent a lifetime building was really just the stage for a deadly play. My story is a reminder that sometimes the greatest danger comes from the very people we love the most. If you've ever felt the sting of betrayal or have a story of your own you'd like to share, I hope you'll leave a comment below so we can all find strength together. And if you feel so inclined, please share this story and stay tuned so you don't miss the next part of this journey. People often say that our lives are defined by the big, earth-shattering events, that our fate is written in the earthquakes that shake the very foundations of our reality. But at 72, after having lived through my share of history watching empires rise and fall in books and in the real world, I've come to believe in a different, quieter truth. I believe that a life isn't shaped by the loud explosions, but by the tiny, hairline cracks, the nearly invisible fractures that appear on the smooth surface of our everyday lives. They start with a careless word, a strange look, a silence that lasts just a little too long, and then, from those fragile cracks, an entire world can come crumbling down. My home was a piece of history itself, tucked away on a cobblestone street in Charleston, South Carolina, where the air is thick with the scent of jasmine and the salt of the Atlantic. This house, with its wide porch and ancient oaks draped in Spanish moss like the veils of time, was more than just bricks and mortar. It was the archive of my family's memories, the place where my late husband Henry and I built a life and raised our only son, Michael. Every creaky floorboard told a story. Every window looking out onto the harbor had witnessed the passing of seasons. After Henry passed, the silence of the house grew deeper, but it was a peaceful silence, filled by my most faithful companions, my books. That afternoon, a typical southern October day, when the sunlight was the color of honey filtering through the oak leaves, I was in my study. It was my favorite room. The walls were lined with floor-to-ceiling mahogany bookshelves holding centuries of knowledge. I'm a retired history professor, and to me, these books were never inanimate objects. They were conversations that spanned generations, voices that were never silenced. I was dusting a first edition of The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, my fingers tracing its worn leather spine. I've always found a strange comfort in stories of collapse. They remind me that nothing is permanent, not even pain, and that from the ashes, a new order can always be born. The sound of Michael's expensive leather shoes echoed on the oak floors in the hallway, a sound both familiar and foreign in the quiet of the house. It was too sharp, too modern. My son was always like that, a crisp, perfectly tailored presence, as if he'd stepped right out of a business magazine. He walked into the study, and the space seemed to shrink just a little from his energy. Michael was 45, a successful financial consultant, with carefully styled hair and a suit that fit without a single wrinkle. His smile was the same, polished, professional, the kind that could reassure the wealthiest of clients. "Mom," he said, his voice warm and full of concern, "back here with your old friends again?" In his hand was a bouquet of pristine white lilies. I don't care for lilies. Their fragrance is too strong, too sweet, and always makes me think of funeral homes. But I smiled and took them anyway. It's a habit mothers have. We learn to love the gifts, not for what they are, but for the one who gives them. "Thank you, Michael, they're lovely." I placed them in an empty vase on the desk, trying to ignore the scent that was already filling the room. He walked around the study, his hand gliding over the spines of the books, but his eyes weren't really seeing them. His gaze was sweeping the room, assessing, appraising. "This house is just too much for you on your own," he began, a familiar topic in recent months. "The upkeep, the cleaning, and those stairs. I really worry." I let out a soft sigh. "I'm fine, dear. The stairs and I have been old friends for 40 years now." "But things are changing, Mom." He stopped in front of my desk, looking at me with a well-practiced seriousness. "You forgot your dentist appointment last week. And yesterday, when I called, you couldn't remember the name of the new neighbor who moved in." Each of his words was a tiny pinprick, puncturing the bubble of confidence I had carefully built around myself. It was true, I had forgotten the appointment, and yes, it had taken me a moment to recall that unfamiliar name. But those were normal things that come with age, not the signs of the decline he was trying to paint. "I'm just worried about you," he continued, his voice softening, persuasive. "I've been looking into a few places, some high-end condos downtown, 24/7, security, on-site medical services, no yard work, no stairs, a safer, more comfortable place for you." "This is my home, Michael," I replied, my voice firmer than I intended. "Every corner of this place is tied to your father, to your childhood. I can't sell memories." His smile tightened for a fraction of a second, but he quickly hid it. "I understand. I just want you to consider it." He placed a hand on my shoulder, a pat that felt more possessive than comforting. "Because your health is the most important thing." The conversation left me feeling uneasy, a chill creeping under my skin. I stood up, perhaps a bit too suddenly, to get some water for the vase. As I passed the small table next to the armchair, my hand trembled uncontrollably and brushed against the tablet that was charging. A sharp crack echoed as it hit the hardwood floor. We both looked down. The dark screen was now fractured by a spiderweb of cracks, radiating from a point of impact in the corner. Silence filled the room, broken only by the steady tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hall. "Mom!" Michael rushed over, not to see if I was all right, but to pick up the tablet. He cradled the inanimate object as if it were something precious. "You see? This is why I worry. You could have fallen. It could have been so much worse." He wasn't yelling, but his tone was worse. It was the voice of a patient adult explaining something to a stubborn child, a voice full of pity and self-righteous validation. In that moment, I wasn't his mother. I was his problem, a problem to be managed, to be solved. I looked at the shattered screen in my son's hands, and for the first time, a real, cold, sharp fear, like a shard of glass, pierced my heart. The crack in the screen didn't feel like just an accident. It felt like an omen. That night, long after Michael had left, and after I had thrown out the suffocating white lilies, the house felt even quieter. I sat in the study, surrounded by darkness, with only the desk lamp illuminating the books. In front of me was the tablet, its broken screen reflecting the light into 100 glittering fragments, like a shattered constellation. I tried to reassure myself. Michael was just being overprotective. He loved me. He was my son. But his words kept replaying in my mind, weaving themselves into the image of those cracks. "Things are changing, Mom. Maybe he was right. Maybe I really was getting weaker, becoming forgetful, losing my grip. Maybe I was just refusing to see the truth." Self-doubt is a slow-acting poison. It doesn't kill you outright, but it erodes your soul from the inside until you no longer recognize yourself. I sat there, in a house full of memories of a strong, independent woman, and I felt myself fading. The feeling of helplessness was terrifying. I had faced the greatest intellectual challenges throughout my career, debated with the most brilliant minds, and yet, here I was, shaken by the concerned words of my own son. I touched the crack on the screen. It was sharp and cold. I didn't know it then, but that crack didn't just split a piece of glass. It was about to split my life in two, the before and the after, before the truth and after the nightmare. And I was standing right on that fragile line, completely unaware of the abyss that was waiting for me on the other side. The quiet Charleston night, which usually brought me peace, seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to begin. And it all started with a broken screen, a small accident, a tiny crack in the fabric of my life. The next morning, Charleston awoke in a thin veil of mist, the soft, early light filtering through the old oaks, painting ghostly shapes on the walkway. Everything outside my window was the same, a heart-wrenching, deceptive peace. But inside me, a small storm was brewing. I decided that self-doubt was an enemy I could not tolerate. I needed to take action, even a small one, to reclaim a sense of control. Fixing the tablet. That would be the first step. I didn't call Michael. I wanted to do this myself. The shop, Sam's Tech, was on a small street, tucked away behind art galleries and noisy cafes. It wasn't a fancy place. It was small, a bit cluttered, with piles of electronic components, and always smelled faintly of soldering flux and old coffee. But Sam Torres, the owner, was a man you could trust. He was in his 50s, with a balding head and thick glasses that were always slipping down his nose. Sam had fixed every electronic device for my family for 15 years, from Michael's first desktop computer to Henry's e-reader. He was part of the small, familiar ecosystem of my life. The little bell on the door chimed as I walked in. Sam looked up from a disemboweled laptop, his face breaking into a familiar smile. "Mrs. Vance, good to see you. Everything all right?" "Hello, Sam. I'm holding up," I replied, placing the tablet, wrapped in a silk scarf, on the counter. This old lady was just a little clumsy. He took it, examining the cracks under the light. "Oh boy, that was quite a fall. But no worries, this screen can be replaced. It'll be good as new." He looked at me over his glasses. "To make sure we don't lose anything, I'll need to back up all your data before I start. Can I get the password from you?" "Of course," I said without a moment's hesitation. "It's Henry1975, capital H. Our password. The year we were married. A simple string of characters that held a lifetime. Michael knew this password too. For a long time now, we hadn't kept secrets from each other about things like that. Or so I thought." "Perfect," Sam said, jotting it down. "Should take about a day. You can come back for it tomorrow. I'll call you when it's ready." I left Sam's shop feeling a little lighter. A small problem was being solved. I walked through the old city market, buying some fresh shrimp and vegetables. I tried to cling to my daily routines, the small rituals that defined my life, as if they were anchors that could hold me against the rising tide. I told myself I was just overreacting, that the imagination of an old widow who spends too much time with historical tragedies was conjuring ghosts that weren't there. I went home and spent the rest of the afternoon in the garden, pruning my roses. The physical labor helped to clear my head. The smell of damp earth, the fragrant roses, the buzzing of the bees. This world was simple, real. Maybe Michael was right. Maybe I just needed to take it easy. My phone rang around 5 o'clock that evening, as the sun began to cast long shadows behind the historic houses. The screen read, "Sam's Tech." I smiled, thinking he worked faster than I expected. "Sam!" "That was quick," I answered cheerfully. But there was no cheerfulness on the other end of the line, just a silence that lasted a second or two, then a tense voice, almost a whisper. "Mrs. Vance, it's me, Sam." His voice was completely different. The usual friendly, easygoing manner was gone, replaced by an urgency, an unconcealed anxiety. My heart started to beat a little faster. "What is it, Sam? Is the tablet beyond repair?" No, that's not it. It's repaired. The screen is done." He hesitated as if weighing each word. "But there's something strange. When I was transferring the data, I stumbled upon something. I think you need to see this." A coldness began to spread from my chest. "See what, Sam?" "I can't say over the phone," he replied, his voice even lower. "Can you come to the shop right now? And please, don't tell anyone. Come alone. Don't tell anyone." 20 minutes later, as I drove through the familiar streets, those words echoed in my mind like a disturbing refrain. Why the secrecy? What could possibly be on my tablet that would make a repairman so afraid? 1,000 wild theories raced through my mind. Had I accidentally downloaded some dangerous virus? Had someone hacked my accounts? But none of it could explain the gravity in Sam's voice. Sam's shop was closed, the closed sign hanging neatly in the window. But when I knocked softly, the door opened immediately. Sam pulled me inside and locked it behind us. His face was pale under the fluorescent lights. The small shop now felt claustrophobic, like an interrogation room. "Thank you for coming," he said, not looking me in the eye. He led me to the back repair room, where computer parts lay in organized chaos. My tablet was on his workbench, its screen gleaming, flawless, perfectly new. "Here it is," he said. "Screen's replaced. Everything works fine." "So what's—" I began to ask, but he held up a hand. "When I was backing up your data, I have to check the applications to make sure everything transfers correctly. Emails, photos, calendar." He swallowed hard. "I opened your email app, and I don't know why. Maybe it was a mistake. I clicked on the drafts folder. He turned the tablet towards me. The screen showed a list of unsent emails. There were 7 in total. The recipient for all 7 was the same, a strange email address, cssterling@assetprime.com. But it wasn't the recipient that made my blood run cold. It was the subject lines. The Tuscany Plan, Phase 1, Consensus. The Tuscany Plan, Phase 2, Legal Paperwork. The Tuscany Plan. Phase 3, Health Evaluation. The Tuscany Plan, Phase 4, Transition. The Tuscany Plan, Phase 5, Liquidation. The Tuscany Plan, Phase 6, Final Arrangements. And finally, one email marked with a small clock icon, indicating it was scheduled to be sent in the future. Its subject line was just 2 words: the final phase. "Mrs. Vance, I don't know what this is," Sam stammered, his voice full of apology for invading my privacy. "Maybe it's a joke, or you're writing a novel. But what's inside them?" My trembling hand reached out and touched the screen, opening the first email. It wasn't long, just a few lines, written in a cold, detached tone that was not my own. "Mother has finally agreed to consider the move. The persuasion took longer than expected, but her recent cognitive decline has been helpful. Everything is proceeding smoothly." I held my breath, clicking on the second email. "The power of attorney documents have been drafted. Just need her signature. I'll arrange a meeting with the lawyer next week, framing it as a routine update to the will. She won't suspect a thing." My heart felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand. I scrolled through the next emails, each one a deeper stab into my reality. An email about arranging for a trusted doctor to confirm my deteriorating health. An email about contacting appraisers to value the house and Henry's art collection. An email about liquidating assets valued at $5 million. And then, I opened the last email, the scheduled one. The send date was set for January 23rd of next year, 3 months away. Its content was brief, as cold as a coroner's report. "It's done. The funeral was tasteful, just as we planned. Everyone believes it was a natural passing due to old age. The will was read this morning. It'll take a few months to settle everything, but then we're completely free. I'll liquidate everything here. Get ready for our new life in Tuscany, my love." Tuscany, my love. The room swayed. I had to grip the edge of the workbench to stay upright. The air seemed to have been sucked out of my lungs. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a novel. This was a detailed, meticulously crafted plan for my death, written by my son on my own tablet to a woman whose name I had never heard. In Michael's mind, on January 23rd, I would no longer exist. I would just be a name on a tombstone, an entry in a will, a final obstacle that had been cleared so he could start his new life. "Mrs. Vance, are you okay?" Sam's worried voice pulled me back from the brink. He handed me a glass of water, his own hand shaking. I looked at him, this kind, gentle man who just by doing his job had accidentally uncovered a monstrous truth. "Sam," I said, and I was surprised my voice could still make a sound, even though it was hoarse and unfamiliar. Can you copy all of this onto a storage device?" "Everything. The deleted emails, too, if you can find them." "Of course, Mrs. Vance," he replied immediately. "I'll do it right now." I stood there, watching him work, the clicking of the keyboard the only sound in the room. All feeling seemed to have gone numb, replaced by a cold emptiness. 45 years of love, of sacrifice, of sleepless nights, of joys and sorrows, all seemingly erased by those soulless words on a screen. My son, the baby I had carried and given birth to, the one whose first steps I had taught, had planned my final steps on this earth. I drove home in a daze, the familiar roads suddenly alien under the amber glow of the streetlights. The small, cold USB drive in my coat pocket felt as heavy as fate itself. I had thanked Sam, told him to forget everything, to act as if he had seen nothing. He nodded, his face still a mask of shock. He was a good man caught in a very bad story, and I felt a vague pang of guilt for that. When the front door closed behind me, the house greeted me with its usual silence. But tonight, that silence no longer felt peaceful. It felt suffocating, menacing, Every shadow in every corner seemed to whisper of betrayal. The portrait of Michael on the mantel, the beaming smile of a 10-year-old boy, now looked like a grotesque mask. What had I done wrong? Had I raised a monster in this very house? The self-recriminating questions swirled, but I pushed them away. This was not the time for weakness. This was the time to think like a historian. Gather the facts, analyze the evidence, and find the truth, no matter how brutal it was. I didn't go up to my bedroom. Instead, I went straight to my study, my sanctuary, where the greatest minds in history watched over me from their spines. I closed the door firmly, drew the curtains, and turned on my desktop computer. The screen flickered to life, casting a cold, blue light on my face. The USB drive was my starting point. I plugged it in. The 7 draft emails, now safely saved, appeared before me. I read them again, not with the initial shock, but with the analytical eye of a researcher. I looked for details, for clues. C. Sterling at assetprime.com. The name Chloe Sterling. The company Asset Prime. The phrase Tuscany Plan. These were the first threads. I started with the name. A quick internet search gave me results. Chloe Sterling, founder and CEO of Asset Prime, a wealth management consulting firm based in Atlanta with a satellite office in Charleston. The company's website was sleek, professional, filled with testimonials from wealthy clients. A picture of Chloe Sterling emerged, a woman in her late 30s with glossy black hair, sharp eyes, and a confident smile. She exuded power and efficiency. She was the kind of woman Michael would admire, would be drawn to. Was she the "my love" from the final email? It was more than likely. Next, I needed to understand their financial connection. For years, I had entrusted Michael with the management of my investments. He had access to my accounts, an arrangement based on love and absolute trust. Now, that trust had become a weapon pointed at me. I logged into the financial portals, something I rarely did. The quarterly reports Michael gave me always painted a picture of stability and prosperity. But as I dug deeper myself, a different story began to emerge. I'm no financial expert, but I know how to read numbers and spot anomalies. There were large withdrawals, noted as real estate investments or consulting fees, that I had no knowledge of. And then I found it. A massive wire transfer, made 6 months ago, $500,000, from my trust account, transferred to a company called Tuscan Holdings, LLC. My hand was ice cold as I typed that name into the search bar. The results were almost non-existent. A limited liability company registered in Delaware, a haven for shell corporations. No website, no physical address, just a single legal representative. I had almost given up until I tried a different approach, a trick I learned from researching complex historical documents, cross-referencing. I searched for the domain name TuscanHoldings.com. It was registered but inactive. And the person who registered it? Chloe Sterling. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. My son had taken $500,000 of my money and given it to this woman through a shell company. This wasn't just a plan for the future. It was already happening. The betrayal had been unfolding right under my nose, masked by smiles, bouquets of lilies, and false words of concern. Anger began to smolder, a slow-burning fire replacing the initial numbness. I had worked my whole life. Henry and I had saved together, building a legacy not just for us but for our son. And he, along with this stranger, was tearing it apart, turning it into fuel for some lavish life in Italy, a life built on my grave. I needed more information. I needed to know everything. I searched through old files on my computer, hoping to find something Michael might have left behind. And I found it. Deep in a subfolder named Family Documents, a place I would never have thought to check, was a shared cloud folder. Its name was brazenly simple, Project T. My heart pounded as I clicked on it. It was password protected. I tried Michael's usual passwords, his birthday, his childhood dog's name, but nothing worked. I sat back, trying to think like him. Michael was arrogant, but also sentimental in his own way. What would the password be? And then a thought struck me. I typed, Eleanor 1952. My birth year. The folder opened. It was like opening Pandora's box. Inside was the entire plan, laid out with cold, scientific organization. There was a consulting contract between Michael and Chloe Sterling, detailing the restructuring and liquidation of the assets of Mrs. Eleanor Vance. There was a detailed appraisal of my house, my art collection, my antiques, my jewelry. Their total value was staggering, far more than I had ever imagined. And then, there was a document that made it impossible to breathe. It was a draft of a new will, my will, but not written by me. It was professionally drafted, dated just a few weeks prior. In it, everything, from the house to the last of my personal belongings, was left to my beloved son, Michael Vance. And most importantly, it named Michael as the sole executor, giving him complete authority over everything after my death. The document was only missing one thing: my signature. The signature he planned to get during a routine will update meeting. I sat frozen in front of the screen, its blue light illuminating the horror on my face. This wasn't a vague intention. This was a fully assembled machine, oiled and ready to go. Every part was in place. I was just the final gear that needed to be removed for it to start running. I copied the entire folder onto the USB drive alongside the draft emails. The tiny device now held the proof of a crime in the making, a crime hidden under the guise of familial love. Dawn was breaking over Charleston when I finally leaned back in my study armchair. I hadn't slept. I couldn't. My mind was reeling with the information, the plans, the lies. I felt exhausted, but also a terrifying clarity. I was no longer a confused victim. I was an opponent. Michael and his woman had underestimated me. They saw a frail, forgetful old woman, easily manipulated. They didn't see a historian who had spent a lifetime studying strategies, conspiracies, and wars for power. They didn't see a mother who, when cornered to protect her legacy and her life, could become a formidable force. The chill of dawn was nothing compared to the ice spreading through my veins. I had the evidence of the what and the how. Michael and Chloe were planning to take everything from me, but I was still missing one crucial piece. Why? Why would Michael, the son I had given all my love to, be so cruel? Was it simple greed, or was there another force at play, an invisible hand pulling the strings? A historian's intuition told me that to understand the present, you must dig into the past. And the past of this conspiracy had a name: Chloe Sterling. I knew I couldn't do this alone. My internet searches could only take me so far. I needed someone with access to deeper sources of information, someone with sharp analytical skills, and most importantly, someone I could trust without question. Only one name came to mind: Judith Mayhew. Judith and I had been friends for nearly 50 years. We met as young, passionate graduate students at the university, sharing long, sleepless nights in the library and fiery debates over the fall of civilizations. Now, at 70, Judith still refused to retire. She was the head archivist at the College of Charleston, a position that let her preside over her own kingdom, a labyrinth of documents, records, and forgotten secrets. Judith had a mind like a steel trap and a curiosity that never waned. If anyone could uncover the truth about Chloe Sterling, it was her. I called Judith at 9 in the morning, trying to keep my voice steady, as if it were a normal call. "Eleanor, it's been ages," her sharp voice chirped from the other end. "Found another ancient manuscript for me to date?" "Something like that, Judith," I replied, forcing a smile onto my dry lips. "I need your help with a personal research project. It's a bit sensitive. Do you have time today?" The brief silence on the other end told me Judith had noticed something was wrong. She knew me too well. "My office. Half an hour," she said decisively, "and bring coffee." Judith's office was deep in the basement of the university library, a place not for the faint of heart. The air was cool and thick with the smell of old paper. It was surrounded by towering stacks of documents, unlabeled archival boxes, and old maps hanging on the walls. In the midst of this organized chaos, Judith sat like a queen on her throne, her large desk buried in books and papers. I placed 2 cups of coffee on a rare, empty spot. She watched me intently over her tortoiseshell glasses, her sharp blue eyes missing nothing. "All right, Eleanor, spill it. You look like you've seen a ghost." I took a deep breath. I couldn't tell her the whole truth. It was too monstrous, too unbelievable. If I said, "My son is planning to kill me," she would think I'd lost my mind, just as Michael was trying to prove. I had to present it in a logical way, a way Judith's analytical mind could accept. "Judith," I began, choosing my words carefully, "I believe Michael is in serious trouble, financially. I think he's being swindled by a business partner, a woman named Chloe Sterling, from a company called Asset Prime. I found some suspicious transactions and I'm worried he's being manipulated. I need you to help me find out everything you can about this woman. Anything. Her past, her business dealings, personal records, everything." I handed her a piece of paper with the information I had found. Judith took it, her eyes scanning the page. She said nothing, just nodded, her eyes narrowed in concentration. It was the look Judith got when she went into research mode, when the outside world disappeared and only facts and questions remained. "Asset Prime," she murmured. "Sounds flashy. Let's see." She swiveled to her computer screen, her slender fingers beginning to fly across the keyboard with astonishing speed. She wasn't using Google. She was accessing databases that only insiders had clearance for: LexisNexis, Westlaw, public record archives, interstate business registries. Her screen filled with lines of text, numbers, and charts that I couldn't comprehend. I sat in silence, sipping my coffee, listening to the steady clatter of the keys. It was the sound of a hunt in progress. I spent the entire day in Judith's office, a quiet ghost in her kingdom. Every now and then, she would mutter something interesting or, "That's odd." I didn't ask. I knew she needed absolute focus. To pass the time, I wandered between the shelves, breathing in the scent of history. I wondered if, 100 years from now, someone would be researching my story. A small family tragedy in Charleston, a tale of greed and betrayal. Would it be recorded in some document, resting on a dusty shelf just like these? Late in the afternoon, as the sun slanted through the high basement windows, Judith suddenly stopped. She pushed her chair back, stood up, and walked over to the coffee maker. She moved slowly, deliberately, and I knew she had found something important. She returned with 2 fresh cups of coffee, placing one in front of me. She didn't sit down right away. She stood there, her arms crossed, looking at me with a serious expression I had never seen on her before. "Eleanor," she said, her voice low, "you were right. Your son is in trouble, but the problem is much, much bigger than you think." She sat down, turning the computer screen towards me. "First, about your assets. The reports Michael has been giving you are fake. I accessed the original tax records and investment accounts. Your actual net worth isn't $2 million. It's closer to $5.5 million. The number hung in the air. I felt dizzy. Henry and I had lived comfortably, but I never imagined. Michael had lied to me about the scale of my own wealth, perhaps to make the transfer of power seem less significant. But that's not the worst part," Judith continued, her voice turning cold. "Look at this." She clicked through a series of windows. The screen showed old newspaper articles, scanned from local papers in different states. The headlines made me shiver. "Sudden death of Savannah real estate investor. Stroke cited as cause," an article from 3 years ago. The victim was a 78-year-old widower, extremely wealthy. Tech CEO dies in freak accident in Miami, gas leak in mansion suspected, an article from 5 years ago. The victim was a 69-year-old recent divorcee. "What do these 2 men have in common?" Judith asked, though she already knew the answer. They were both clients of Chloe Sterling. She was their financial consultant right before they died. She clicked to another window, displaying court documents. In both cases, she was intimately involved in the liquidation of their estates afterward. In the first case, the victim had changed his will at the last minute, leaving her a gift of $2 million. The family sued, but ultimately lost due to insufficient evidence of undue influence. In the second case, she was made the trustee of a charitable foundation set up by the victim, a position that gave her control over a massive sum of money. She looked me straight in the eye, and I saw in her gaze not just the concern of a friend, but the horror of a researcher who had just discovered a monster. Eleanor, this isn't a common con artist. This is a predator, a black widow. She seeks out older, wealthy men, perhaps lonely or in a transitional phase of life. She gains their trust, takes control of their finances, and then they die. Naturally, accidentally, and she walks away with a fortune. The room seemed to darken. The air grew cold. Michael wasn't just having an affair. He wasn't just greedy. He had fallen into the web of a serial killer, and he was making me her next victim. Perhaps he didn't even realize he was just a tool, a pawn in a much larger game. Once I was gone, would he become useless, even a liability, in Chloe's eyes? Would he be the next one to have a freak accident? The fear for my own life was now multiplied by a new, twisted, and contradictory fear for the son who was plotting to kill me. "We have to go to the police," I whispered, though even I didn't believe my own words. Judith shook her head. "And tell them what? That your son is dating a woman with a suspicious past? That you don't like the draft emails on your tablet? They won't do anything, Eleanor. There's no proof of a crime having been committed, only disturbing coincidences and unrealized plans. It would be your word against your son's, a successful businessman. They'll think you're a paranoid old woman." She was right. Michael had already laid the groundwork for that. He had planted the seeds of my cognitive decline. A wild accusation like this would only solidify his story. I felt like I was trapped in a perfect cage. I couldn't go to the police. I couldn't confront Michael, as it would only accelerate their plan. I had to get out of this myself. "Thank you, Judith," I said, my voice regaining a bit of its strength. The fear had condensed into something harder: resolve. "You've told me exactly what I needed to know. You've shown me who the real enemy is." I stood up, ready to leave. Judith grabbed my hand, her eyes full of worry. "What are you going to do, Eleanor? You can't face them alone. This woman is dangerous." I looked at my old friend, the only person in the world who knew a fraction of the burden I was carrying. History teaches us, Judith, that the most powerful empires often fall not from invading armies, but from mistakes made within, from arrogance, from underestimating the forces they deem to be weak. I squeezed her hand. "They think I'm a relic of the past, easily discarded. They're about to find out that even the oldest relics can hold surprising power. Knowledge is power, but secret knowledge is a weapon." I returned home from the library, carrying the horrifying truth about Chloe Sterling like a suit of invisible armor. The fear was still there, a cold and constant undercurrent, but it was now encased in a shell of icy resolve. Judith had pulled back the curtain on the past, showing me the monster's true face. Now, my task was to deal with her puppet, my own son. I knew they would act soon. The draft emails showed their urgency, and Phase 3, health evaluation, was undoubtedly their next move. I would not sit and wait for them to strike. I would prepare for battle on my home turf. The next few days passed in a strange, heightened state of tension. I maintained a calm exterior, continuing my daily routines. I gardened, I read, I called friends. But beneath that placid surface, my mind was operating like a military command center. I reviewed every document, every email, every number, memorizing each detail, building a fortress of facts in my mind. I was preparing for the interrogation I knew was coming. And it came on a Tuesday morning, 2 days after my meeting with Judith. I was in the kitchen, enjoying my morning tea and reading the local paper when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. A cold sense of alarm ran down my spine. I looked through the peephole. It was Michael. And next to him was an older man with silver hair, wearing a gray tweed suit. I recognized him immediately. Dr. Miller, our family doctor for over 20 years. I opened the door, managing to look naturally surprised. "Michael, Dr. Miller, what a surprise. Please, come in." "Morning, Mom," Michael said, placing a perfunctory kiss on my cheek, the kiss of Judas. "I know this is sudden, but I was on my way to the office and bumped into Dr. Miller. I was telling him how you haven't been feeling well lately, so he offered to stop by and check on you, save you the trip." A smooth, perfectly orchestrated lie. "Doctor," Miller nodded, offering a professional smile. "Hello, Mrs. Vance. It's been too long. Just a routine wellness check. I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all, not at all," I replied, leading them into the living room, my heart beating a martial rhythm against my ribs. "Please, sit. I'll make some tea." "No need, Mom," Michael said quickly, placing a hand on my shoulder, a gesture meant to keep me there. "This won't take long." We sat facing each other in the living room, the cherrywood coffee table between us. The morning sun streamed in, highlighting the tiny dust motes dancing in the air. Everything looked so normal, so peaceful, but I could feel the tension in the room, a coiled energy like the air before a storm. Michael sat beside Dr. Miller, playing the part of the concerned son. "Doctor?" Miller opened his leather briefcase, taking out a clipboard and a pen. The play had begun. "So, Mrs. Vance," Dr. Miller began in a gentle, placating tone, "Michael was saying you've been feeling a little forgetful lately. It's perfectly normal at our age. I just want to ask you a few simple questions. Is that all right?" I nodded, looking him straight in the eye. "Of course, doctor." Michael leaned back, crossing his arms, an almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. He was waiting for me to stumble, to get confused, to provide him with the ammunition he needed to end my independence. "Good," the doctor said. "What is today's date, ma'am?" "It's Tuesday, October 28th, I answered clearly. "The year is 2025. It's about 15 inches the morning. The weather outside is quite nice, clear skies, temperature around 72 degrees Fahrenheit." Dr. Miller blinked, jotting something down. Michael's smile faded. "Very good. And who is the current president of the United States?" "That would be Robert Hemings of the Democratic Party in the second year of his first term." "And who was his predecessor?" "Senator Eleanor Clark, the first woman to hold the office. She served 2 full terms." The questions continued, ranging from general knowledge to short-term memory tests. "I'm going to read you a list of 5 words. Try to remember them. I'll ask you for them again in a little while." He read, "House, river, tree, horse, blue." I nodded. He moved to another test. "Can you count backwards from 100 by 7s? "Certainly," I replied. 100, 93, 86, 79, 72, 65, 58, 51, 44, 37, 30, 23, 16, 9, 2. I answered, without a second of hesitation. I had spent the weekend practicing the standard cognitive tests I found online. I was prepared. The confidence on Michael's face had completely vanished, replaced by a sullen frown. Dr. Miller seemed a bit flustered. He wasn't getting the results he expected. "Excellent, Mrs. Vance," he said, clearing his throat. "Your memory is very sharp today." He flipped a page on his clipboard. "Which is quite surprising because, according to my records, when you came in for a checkup last month, the results were quite different. Do you recall that appointment? On September 15th? There it was, the moment of truth, their trump card, and mine. I tilted my head, feigning thought. September 15th, last month. That's strange, Dr. Miller. I'm quite certain I didn't have an appointment with you on that day. Perhaps you've forgotten, Michael interjected, his voice dripping with false sympathy. That's exactly what I've been worried about, Mom. I turned to look at my son. For the first time, I let the ice in my eyes show. No, Michael, I haven't forgotten. Then I turned back to Dr. Miller, my voice still calm, but now it carried the weight of truth. I haven't forgotten, because on September 15th, I wasn't in Charleston. I was in Washington, D.C. Silence descended on the room. Dr. Miller looked at me, then at Michael. I continued, my voice now that of a professor giving a lecture, clear, concise, and indisputable. I was the keynote speaker at the National Historical Association's annual symposium. I gave a speech on the evening of the 15th, titled The Collapse of Trust, an analysis of historical coups. There were about 500 people in attendance. I stood up, walked to the small cabinet in the corner, and retrieved a document folder. I placed it on the coffee table and opened it. Here, I said, sliding a paper towards Dr. Miller, are my plane tickets, round trip. My name, the dates, the flight numbers. It's all there. I slid out another paper. Here is the bill from the Hay Adams Hotel. 5 nights, from the 13th to the 18th of September. And then I pulled out a photograph. And this, doctor, is a picture of me with Senator John Maxwell after my speech. He introduced me. I believe you recognize him." Dr. Miller stared at the documents, then at the photo. His face went from confused to pale, then flushed red with embarrassment and perhaps fear. He had been drawn into a fraud, a serious breach of medical ethics, and the irrefutable proof was lying right in front of him. He turned to Michael, and this time the professional smile was gone. "Michael," he said, his voice hoarse, "can you please explain this?" Michael was speechless. He looked at me, his eyes a mixture of shock, anger, and for the first time, a flicker of fear. He had been caught red-handed. His carefully constructed plan had just been demolished by a few pieces of paper and a photograph. There must be a mistake with the dates," he stammered, trying to salvage the situation. "Maybe it was another day." "There is no mistake," I said, my voice like ice. "Your records, doctor, are a fabrication. The question is, who fabricated them? Was it you, at my son's request? Or did my son do it himself and deceive you as well?" Dr. Miller shot to his feet, hastily gathering his papers. I think there has been a serious misunderstanding here. I have to go. We'll talk later, Michael." He practically fled from the room, not daring to look back. The front door slammed shut, leaving Michael and me in the heavy silence of the living room. The play was over. Now, only the naked truth remained. He looked at me, and for a moment, I didn't see my adult son. I saw a child caught doing something wrong, a child searching for another lie to cover the last one. Dr. Miller's slamming door still hung in the air, the final sound of a clumsy play that had just ended. The living room, which moments ago was the stage for a medical interrogation, had now transformed into an arena. It was just the two of us, mother and son, but the distance between the two armchairs where we sat seemed to have become an uncrossable chasm. The silence stretched on, heavy and filled with unspoken words. I didn't speak. I had made my move. Now it was time to see how my opponent would respond. Michael was the one who broke the silence. He didn't scream, didn't get angry. Instead, he did something even more terrifying. He laughed, a dry, humorless laugh, a laugh of frustration and contempt. "Unbelievable," he said, shaking his head as if he were the one who had been betrayed. "You always have to be the smartest person in the room, don't you? Even if it means sabotaging your own family." I looked at him, unflinching. "I'm not sabotaging anything, Michael. I'm protecting what's mine, protecting myself." "Protecting?" He stood up, starting to pace in front of the fireplace, like a caged animal. "You call going through my things, spying on my private activities, setting a trap for our family doctor, protecting? You're acting paranoid." "Don't you use that word with me," I replied, my voice sharp. "Don't you dare try to paint me as the crazy one when you're the one who's been lying. I know about Chloe Sterling. I know about the $500,000. I know about the Tuscan Holdings shell company, and I know about Tuscany. Every name, every number I spoke was like a punch." He stopped pacing and turned to face me. The mask of the devoted son had completely dissolved. Now, his eyes held only the nakedness of greed and the anger of a thwarted plan. "So, he said, his voice low and cold, "you've been digging. Why? Why couldn't you just leave it alone? I was just trying to build a future, a better future for all of us." "Our future?" I asked, a bitter irony rising in my throat. "Or a future for you and her? A future built on your father's legacy and my demise?" He didn't flinch at my accusation. There was no shame, no remorse in his eyes, only the irritation of a businessman whose deal had hit a snag. "You're being dramatic," he said, waving his hand impatiently. "You don't understand the real world. You've lived your whole life in your ivory tower with your books and your theories. Money, connections, opportunities. These things are complicated. Sometimes you have to take strong measures." "Strong measures?" I repeated, my voice trembling with indignation. "Drafting emails about your own mother's funeral? Falsifying medical records? Planning to seize everything I own? Is that what you call strong measures?" He took a step closer to me, and for the first time in my life, I felt a physical threat from my own son. He didn't raise his hand, but his posture, the way he looked down at me, was full of condescension and menace. "You have no idea what you're up against," he hissed, his voice now a dangerous whisper. "You think you're clever, that you won a little battle today, but you've made a fatal mistake. You let me know that you know." He paused, letting those words sink in. "Before," he continued, "I could take my time, be persuasive. Not anymore. You've forced my hand. You're acting erratically, paranoid, and you're a danger to yourself. You're making baseless accusations against me and my business partner." He pulled his phone from his pocket. "It only takes one call, Eleanor," he said, using my first name for the first time, without the word Mom. "One call to the family lawyer, to a judge I know. I'll present my concerns. I'll show them the crazy emails you've been sending your friends." He was making it up, but the threat was real. "I'll tell them how you just attacked Dr. Miller with conspiracy theories. I will request an emergency medical conservatorship." The room seemed to drop a few degrees. I knew he wasn't just bluffing. He had the money, the influence, and a well-prepared story. I was an old widow, living alone. He was a successful businessman, a worried son. Who would society believe? Who was the system designed to protect? "They'll take you to a place," he went on, his eyes never leaving mine, "a very nice, comfortable place, where doctors can observe you, where they can help you stabilize. You won't have a phone, you won't have visitors without the guardian's permission, and that guardian, of course, will be me." He smiled, a cold, cruel smile. "And once you're in there, with an official medical record stating you're delusional and suffering from dementia, no one in this world will believe a word you say. You can scream about conspiracies until you're hoarse. They'll just nod, take notes, and up your medication." The threat was more brutal than a knife. It targeted not just my life, but my mind, my dignity, my very being. He wanted to erase me while I was still alive, to turn me into a non-person, a voice no one would hear. For a moment, I felt despair wash over me. His trap was perfect. If I stayed silent, he would continue with his plan to kill me. If I spoke up, he would have me committed. Both paths led to my destruction. But then, the fire of anger inside me flared up again, stronger than the fear. I had not lived 72 years, had not weathered the storms of life, only to be threatened and subdued by the child I brought into this world. I stood up, facing him, our eyes now level. "Go ahead, Michael," I said, my voice no longer trembling. It was steady, hard as steel. "Make your calls, tell them all your lies, but know this, I will talk too. I will tell them about Chloe Sterling and the 2 men who died mysterious deaths. I will show them the draft emails, the bank transactions, the forged will. Maybe they won't believe me at first, but the truth has a power of its own. It's like a seed. Once it's planted, it will find its way to the light. And you, my son, will not be able to live in the dark forever to hide it." I looked him straight in the eye, without blinking. "You made a mistake. You thought I was weak, but you've forgotten who I am. I am the daughter of a lawyer, the wife of a diplomat, and a historian who has spent her life exposing lies. You want a war? Fine, you'll get one." He stared at me, stunned, perhaps not expecting such fierce resistance. For a flicker of a second, I saw hesitation in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a hardened resolve. "You're going to regret this," he said, almost in a whisper. Then he turned, walked swiftly out of the living room and out of the house. The slamming door echoed once again, but this time it carried a different meaning. It wasn't the end of a play. It was the starting gun, signaling that an open war had officially begun. Michael's rage left a haunting silence in the house. The air felt thick again, carrying the aftertaste of his threats. I knew he wasn't making empty promises. Michael was a methodical man. He wouldn't make a threat without a plan to back it up. My time was running out. With every passing hour, the legal and psychological net he was casting would draw tighter. Waiting and reacting was no longer an option. History had taught me that the best defense is sometimes a bold and unexpected offense. I had to get one step ahead. I had to confront the person who was truly pulling the strings. Chloe Sterling. The name now carried a sinister weight. She wasn't just a greedy mistress. She was an architect of death, a predator in consultant's clothing. Confronting her was a crazy move, a gamble that Judith would have surely advised against. But my intuition, honed over decades of studying the most complex and darkest souls in history, told me it was the only path. To defeat an enemy like Chloe, I needed to understand her, to look her in the eye, and to find a weakness, even the smallest crack in that perfect facade. I didn't call for an appointment. A scheduled meeting would give her time to prepare, to erect her defenses. I needed the element of surprise. I had found the address for the Asset Prime office in Charleston, a modern glass and steel building downtown, but I wasn't going there. An office is a fortress, protected by receptionists and anonymous walls. I wanted to meet her on more neutral ground, a public place where she couldn't completely control the situation. Through a little more digging on social media and in business articles, I found her frequent haunt, the Palmetto Lounge, a chic cafe bar in a boutique hotel popular with the business elite and the wealthy. It was the perfect stage. I chose my outfit carefully, not my gardening clothes or the simple wool dress I usually wore. I wore a navy blue silk suit, a designer piece Henry had given me years ago, paired with my mother's pearls and a classic leather handbag. I put on light makeup, my hair styled in a neat bun. I wasn't trying to look younger. I wanted to look exactly like who I was, a woman of status, intellect, and someone not to be trifled with. I was walking into the lion's den, and I wouldn't be doing it as a lamb. When I arrived at the Palmetto Lounge at 3 in the afternoon, the place was relatively quiet. Soft lighting, smooth jazz, and the aroma of roasted coffee and leather created an atmosphere of sophisticated privacy. And there she was, sitting alone at a table by the window, looking out at the harbor. Chloe Sterling was even more striking in person. She had a cold, sharp beauty. Her black hair was cut in a perfect, severe bob, her charcoal gray business dress hugging a slender frame. She was working on a slim laptop, her long fingers flying across the keys, occasionally taking a sip of espresso. She radiated an aura of absolute control and power. I took a deep breath, steadying my pounding heart. Then I walked towards her table. She looked up as I approached, her slate gray eyes assessing me quickly, efficiently. There was no surprise, maybe a flicker of curiosity. "Miss Sterling?" I said, my voice calm and clear. "I am," she replied, not smiling. "Can I help you?" "My name is Eleanor Vance," I said, looking her directly in the eye. "I'm Michael Vance's mother." This time, a spark of surprise did flash in her eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. She closed her laptop, a gesture that signaled her full attention was now on me. She gestured to the chair opposite her. "Please have a seat, Mrs. Vance," she said, her voice as smooth and controlled as everything else about her. "I have a feeling this isn't a social call." I sat down, placing my handbag beside me. The waiter approached, and I ordered a chamomile tea, a deliberate choice to project calm. Before I began, I placed my phone on the table, screen down, right between us. The recording app had been activated before I walked in. "No, it's not," I began. "I'm here to talk about my son, and about you." Chloe took a sip of her espresso, her gray eyes never leaving my face. "I'm listening." "I know about your plan," I said, getting straight to the point. "I know about the liquidation of my assets. I know about Tuscany, and I know that the plan hinges on my passing, a pre-arranged passing." She didn't deny it. She didn't feign shock. She simply raised one eyebrow slightly, as if I had just made an interesting observation about the weather. Her composure was chilling. It was more than an admission. It was an assertion of dominance. "You are a remarkable woman, Mrs. Vance," she said, a cold, almost admiring smile touching her lips. "Michael said you were sharp, but it seems he underestimated you a great deal." "He underestimated me in many ways," I replied. "So the question is," she said, leaning back in her chair, "now that you know, what do you plan to do? Go to the police?" "I think you're smart enough to know that won't get you anywhere. The word of an old woman with cognitive decline against a reputable financial consultant and a deeply concerned son, you'd make a fool of yourself." She was reciting Michael's script. They were on the same page. "I'm not here to threaten you with the police," I said. "I'm here to understand, to look into the eyes of the woman who turned my son into a matricidal plotter. Chloe laughed, a small, refined sound, but it was filled with mockery. "Oh, my dear Mrs. Vance, you have it all wrong. I didn't turn Michael into anything he wasn't already. I simply opened a door. He's the one who chose to walk through it." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Let me tell you about your son. Michael is a weak man. He craves the wealth and the freedom he thinks money can buy, but he's too afraid to go after it himself. He loves you, in a way, but it's the resentful, guilt-ridden love of a child who never truly grew up. He resents you for controlling his life, for being the standard he could never live up to. He wants to escape your shadow, but he's too cowardly to do it honestly." Every word she spoke was a precise cut, peeling back truths I had perhaps always known but never dared to admit. "I just showed him a path," Chloe continued, "a way to get everything he wanted without the messy, emotional divorce from his mother. A clean, efficient solution. He jumped at it with both hands." The cruelty in her words sent a chill down my spine. But then, she did something I absolutely did not expect. Her tone shifted. "But Michael is also a fool," she said, shaking her head with an air of regret. "He's too emotional, too careless. Leaving those emails in a drafts folder was a rookie mistake. And now that you know, he becomes a liability. A man plotting to kill his mother, once discovered, becomes unpredictable. He might panic, he might confess." She looked directly at me, and I realized this chess game was more complex than I thought. This wasn't an alliance, it was a spider's web, and Michael was just as trapped in it as I was. "Which is why," Chloe said, her voice now businesslike, as if proposing a merger, "I think you and I have a common enemy, Michael's incompetence." I stared at her, speechless. "Here is my proposal, Mrs. Vance," she said, steepling her fingers on the table. "Work with me. You have the knowledge. I have the evidence Michael gave me, recordings of conversations, documents he signed. Together, we set him up. You will be the grieving mother who discovered her wicked son's plot. I will be the conscientious business partner who tried to talk him out of it. The police will believe us. Michael will go to prison." I stared at her, trying to find the catch. "And what do you get out of this?" Her smile returned. "I get to be safe from a co-conspirator who has become a liability. And of course, I still need to be compensated for my time and expertise. After Michael is convicted, you'll need someone to manage the liquidation of the estate discreetly. I'll take a reasonable consulting fee, let's say $1 million. You'll keep the other $4.5 million, and most importantly, you'll get to live. Everybody wins, except for Michael, of course. A deal with the devil. She was offering me a way out, a lifeline, at the cost of the ultimate betrayal of my own son. She was asking me to help her throw Michael to the wolves to save myself. "Why should I trust you?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Because you have no other choice," Chloe replied, her confidence unwavering. "Let's face it, Mrs. Vance, Michael isn't going to stop. After your confrontation, he's going to move even faster. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. He will find a way to silence you. The next cup of tea he makes for you might just be your last." She stood up, leaving a bill on the table. "You have until midnight tonight to think about it. If you agree, send me a text message with a single word, Tuscany. I will then send you further instructions. If I don't hear from you, I will assume you've declined, and I will have to take my own measures to protect myself. Which means I will call Michael and tell him you came to see me, that you know everything, and that he needs to act immediately." She gave me one last, cold, powerful look. "Choose, Mrs. Vance. Work with me, or go home and wait for your son. Either way, I suggest you make your decision wisely. Your life depends on it." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving me alone with my cold chamomile tea and an unimaginable choice. I looked down at the phone on the table. It had recorded everything. I left the Palmetto Lounge and walked out into the humid Charleston afternoon, but I didn't feel the heat. A cold winter had settled deep inside me. Chloe Sterling's offer echoed in my mind, a devil's symphony with notes both seductive and deadly. Conspire with a murderer to frame my own son. It was an unthinkable choice, a double betrayal that no soul should have to bear. But then I realized this wasn't a test of morality. This was a game of survival. Chloe had shown me her cards, and now it was my turn to make a move. I didn't go straight home. The house was no longer a sanctuary. It was a potential trap. Instead, I drove to the waterfront park and sat on a bench overlooking the harbor, where large ships silently came and went. I needed space. I needed the sound of the waves and the cries of the gulls to drown out the screaming voices in my head. I took out my phone and listened to the recording. Chloe's voice was clear, cold, without a hint of hesitation. "He becomes a liability once you're gone. Michael is a weak man. You have until midnight." Every sentence was another hammer blow, driving the final nail into the coffin of any illusion I had left about Michael. He wasn't a manipulated victim. He was an accomplice, a coward who was willing to sacrifice his mother. And Chloe, the mastermind, was just as willing to sacrifice him. They weren't an alliance. They were two sharks hunting together, ready to turn on each other once the prey was down. And I was the prey. In that brutal truth, I found clarity. I couldn't trust Chloe. Working with her would only be a stay of execution. Once Michael was out of the way, I would be the only one who knew about her past, the only one who could connect her to my son's downfall. I would become the next liability. Her offer wasn't a life raft. It was a more sophisticated trap, disguised as a choice. And I couldn't just take this recording to the police. Judith was right. They would listen. They would investigate. But that process would take time. And in that time, Chloe would make good on her threat. She would call Michael, push him to act. I would be in mortal danger while waiting for the slow wheels of justice to turn. No, I couldn't rely on anyone else. I had to end this chess game myself. Tonight, I had to set my own trap, one big enough to catch both sharks at once. A trap they would willingly swim into, thinking they were closing in on their final victory. A plan began to form in my mind, audacious, dangerous, and complex. It required me to play a perfect role, to face both my enemies at once, on my own stage. It required absolute trust in the one and only ally I had. I called Judith. "Judith," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I need one last favor, and you can't ask any questions. Just do exactly as I say." "Eleanor, you're scaring me," her worried voice came back. "There's no time for fear, my friend," I replied. "Can you access the security cameras in my neighborhood, the public ones on the street corners?" "Maybe," with a little technical wrangling. "Why?" "I need you to watch my house remotely, and I'm sending you an audio file. This recording," I said, looking at my phone, "is my life insurance. I'm going to walk you through setting up a system so that if anything happens to me, everything is automatically sent to the police and the major news outlets. Let's call it my digital dead man switch." "Good heavens, Eleanor. What are you planning to do?" "I'm planning to end this," I said. "And Judith, the most important thing, call 911. Have them dispatched to my address at exactly 10 p.m. tonight. Not a minute sooner, not a minute later. Tell them there's a hostage situation in progress. Say whatever you have to get them there in full force. But they must arrive at 10 o'clock sharp." I could hear Judith's heavy breathing on the other end of the line, but she didn't argue. She had been my friend for too long to know that when my mind was made up, nothing could sway me. "All right, Eleanor," she said, her voice full of resignation. 10 o'clock. Godspeed." After hanging up, I got to work. I returned home, not with the feeling of prey returning to its lair, but of a hunter preparing for the final hunt. I walked through the house, checking every corner, every exit. Then, I began to set the stage. I went into the study and retrieved the devices my late, tech-loving husband, Henry, had once bought. Tiny, coin-sized hidden cameras and highly sensitive microphones. He'd bought them as a hobby, but I would use them to save my life. I placed one camera on a bookshelf, disguised among the leather-bound volumes. Another on the mantelpiece, aimed directly at the sitting area. A microphone was hidden under the coffee table. All were wirelessly connected to a laptop in my office, which was live-streaming everything to Judith. Next, I prepared for my role. I changed out of the power suit and into a silk robe, something that looked both comfortable and a little fragile. I let my hair down, messing it up slightly. I wanted to look like a woman who had broken, who had surrendered. At 8 o'clock, I sent a text message to Chloe Sterling, just one word: Tuscany. Less than a minute later, my phone buzzed. A message from Chloe. Wise decision. Michael is on his way to you now. He thinks he's coming to persuade you one last time. Play the part of the exhausted, frightened mother. Agree to all his demands. I will arrive at 9:45 to assist. We will take the next step together. My heart hammered. The trap was set. They were both coming. I brewed a pot of chamomile tea, its calming scent filling the house, a scent of false peace. I also prepared another cup of tea, into which I had crushed 2 powerful sleeping pills prescribed to me after Henry's death, pills I had never taken. That cup was set aside. At 9:15, the doorbell rang. It was Michael. I opened the door, my face a mask of weary defeat. He looked at me, a flicker of triumph in his eyes, but he quickly hid it under a look of concern. "Mom," he said, stepping inside, "I was so worried about you. After our fight." "It's all right, Michael," I interrupted, my voice weak. "You were right. I'm just too tired to fight anymore." I led him into the living room, where the soft, warm lighting created a cozy atmosphere. I invited him to sit and poured him a cup of tea. "I only want what's best for you," he said, taking the cup, his voice now back to that practiced, caring softness. He had no idea his every word, his every move, was being recorded. He took a small box from his coat pocket. "I brought you some new herbal tea. This one is excellent for sleep, helps calm the nerves. You should try it." I looked at the box. This was it, the final phase, wrapped in the packaging of concern. "Thank you, dear," I whispered, taking the box. "Let me go make a cup." I went to the kitchen, my hands trembling, but not from fear. It was sheer adrenaline. I opened his box of tea. Inside were perfectly normal-looking tea bags. I took one out and made a new cup of tea. But as I turned my back to the kitchen doorway, I quickly swapped it with the drugged cup I had prepared earlier. I returned to the living room, holding the 2 cups. I handed him the normal chamomile. I kept the cup with his poison, reserving it for another, more special guest. "We need to talk about the paperwork, Mom," he began, getting down to business. "The lawyer has everything ready. It just needs your signature." I nodded slowly, as if sinking into a state of resigned acceptance. I was buying time, waiting. And then, at 9:45 on the dot, the doorbell rang again. "I'll get it," Michael said, standing up. I held my breath. Michael opened the door, and Chloe Sterling swept into my living room as if she owned it. She wore a black trench coat over a form-fitting dress. Every step exuded cold confidence. She glanced at me, a subtle nod, like a director pleased with her actor's performance. Then she turned to Michael, her face a mask of professional sympathy. "Michael," she said, her voice like velvet, "I got your worried message. I came as soon as I could. Mrs. Vance, you don't look well." "Hello, Miss Sterling," I replied weakly, staying in character. "Michael is taking care of me." "It's the right thing to do," Chloe said, placing her designer handbag on a chair. "Family first." She looked at Michael. "Have you spoken to her about the papers?" "I have," Michael replied, clearly relieved by her presence. "She's agreed. She understands it's for the best." "Excellent," Chloe said. A fleeting smile crossed her lips, a smile whose true meaning only I understood. "In that case, perhaps we should get things finalized quickly so Mrs. Vance can get some rest." She sat in the armchair opposite me, forming a triangle of power in the room. Michael stood beside her, like a loyal adjutant. I was the other point of the triangle, the weak, cornered one, or so they thought. "Before we sign anything," I said, my voice trembling, May I ask a question?" "Of course, Mom," Michael said, his tone dripping with false patience. I looked directly at Chloe, ignoring my son. "Why Tuscany?" I asked. "Of all the places in the world, why Tuscany?" Chloe seemed slightly taken aback by the question. She glanced at Michael, then back at me. A sly smile appeared. "It was a dream," she said, her tone confidential. Michael has always dreamed of retiring there, a villa in the hills, the vineyards, the golden sun, a place to start over. He told me all about it. No, I said, shaking my head slowly. That wasn't his dream. It was his father's. It was Henry's. Silence fell over the room. Michael stared at me, stunned. Your father and I planned that trip for years, I continued, my voice beginning to regain its strength. We saved, we studied maps. It's where we were going to go after I retired. It was our dream. A dream you stole, just like you're trying to steal everything else. Mom, Michael started, but I held up my hand. No, Michael, enough. The play is over. I reached for the remote control on the table and pressed a button. From the small speakers hidden in the bookshelves, Chloe's voice from our meeting at the cafe filled the room, crisp and cold. He becomes a liability once you're gone. Michael is a weak man. He's too emotional, too careless. Michael's face went through a rapid series of emotions in a matter of seconds, from confusion to disbelief to horrified realization. He whipped his head around to look at Chloe, his mouth agape. His eyes, for the first time, held the same betrayal I had felt. Chloe's face hardened. Her mask of calm finally cracked. She looked at me, not with admiration anymore, but with pure, unadulterated hatred. You recorded me, she hissed. I recorded everything, I replied, standing up. The fake frailty was gone. I was now Eleanor Vance, professor of history, who had spent a lifetime studying the downfall of arrogant tyrants. From Michael's draft emails to your treacherous offer of partnership, I have it all. What have you done? Michael yelled, his voice breaking with panic. He looked from me to Chloe, realizing he wasn't the puppet master, but just a pawn in a game he didn't understand. I did what I had to do, I said, to survive. Chloe stood up too. She wasn't panicked like Michael. Instead, her face grew terrifyingly cold and decisive. You've made a very serious mistake, she said, her voice low and dangerous. You think that recording will save you? It just ensures you won't live to play it in court. She slowly reached into her handbag. I knew what was in there. It wasn't paperwork. Chloe, no! Michael yelled, taking a step back. But Chloe paid him no mind. Her eyes were locked on me. You're both fools. You should have known when to quit. She pulled out her hand. In it was a small, sharp stiletto, its silver blade flashing in the lamplight. It was small, but it looked incredibly lethal. The plan has changed, Chloe announced, her voice like ice. Now it's a family tragedy. A delusional old mother attacks her son and his business partner in a paranoid fit. You will die in the act of self-defense. Michael, unfortunately, will be grievously wounded, but will luckily survive. A sad story, but perfectly believable. She started walking towards me, the knife held expertly. Michael stood frozen, too terrified to move. This was the moment I had prepared for, but no amount of preparation could stop the primal wave of fear that surged through me. But with the fear came adrenaline. Think again, Chloe, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, backing away towards the fireplace. Do you think I'm foolish enough to rely on just one recording? She paused, a few feet away from me. What do you mean? I've already sent everything, I lied, a calculated bluff. Every piece of evidence, to my lawyer, to a trusted friend. They have specific instructions. If I don't call them by 10:30, everything gets sent to the police and every major newspaper in the city. Killing me now just gets you caught faster. I was betting that her arrogance would make her believe I was capable of such a contingency plan. For a moment, she hesitated. Her gray eyes narrowed, analyzing, trying to figure out if I was telling the truth. It was in that moment of hesitation that Michael finally moved. Maybe it was self-preservation, or maybe one last flicker of filial duty kicked in. He screamed and threw himself between me and Chloe. Don't! Chloe, taken by surprise, reacted with a predator's instinct. She swung the knife. A cry of pain echoed, but it wasn't mine. Michael staggered back, clutching his arm. Blood began to soak through his expensive shirt. And then, right on cue, a piercing sound came from outside. Sirens. Lots of them. Getting closer. Fast. The color drained from Chloe's face. She realized she'd been tricked. My bluff didn't matter anymore. The police were here. Everything happened in a flash. She turned to me, her eyes wild with fury. She wasn't going down alone. She lunged, the knife raised. I had no time to think. I just acted. The drugged tea I had prepared was still on the table. I grabbed the cup and threw its contents directly in her face. The hot, though no longer scalding, and viscous liquid splashed across her face. She screamed in surprise and pain, her hands flying to her eyes. It was the moment I needed. Glass shattered as police smashed through the windows and the front door. Black-clad figures, heavily armed, swarmed into the living room from all directions. "Police, drop the weapon!" The shout reverberated through the room. Chloe, temporarily blinded and disoriented, stood frozen. The knife fell from her hand, clattering with a sharp ring on the hardwood floor. Flashlight beams sliced through the room, landing on Chloe's horrified face, on Michael clutching his bleeding arm, and on me, standing against the mantelpiece, shaking but unbroken. I saw the red laser dots dancing on Chloe's chest. The game was over. Checkmate. As a police officer cuffed Chloe and led her away, her eyes found mine through her messy hair and the tea stains on her face. It was an unreadable look, a mixture of hatred, defeat, and a twisted kind of respect. I had won. I had survived. But as I watched my son being tended to by paramedics, looking at the pool of his blood on the Persian rug Henry had bought, I felt no joy of victory. I just felt a profound, endless emptiness. I had saved my life, but I had lost my only son forever. That terrible night didn't end with the sirens or the flashing lights. It stretched on, blurring into a hazy series of days filled with interrogations, statements, and cold legal proceedings. My home, my sanctuary, became a crime scene, violated by strangers in uniform who walked through it with the grim formality of archaeologists excavating a fallen civilization. Yellow tape was strung across the front door, a public declaration of the family tragedy I had tried so hard to contain. I didn't stay there. Judith came, wordlessly held me, and took me to her house, where I spent the next few days in a state of near catatonia, simply existing. The outside world moved on, but mine had stopped. The story broke, becoming a sensational feast for the local press. The Vance family tragedy, professor nearly murdered by son and lover. They painted a lurid tale of greed and deception, but they could never touch its painful core. The grief of a mother watching the child she bore, being led away in handcuffs. Michael made bail after a few days, his arm bandaged. He tried to reach me, but his calls went unanswered, his texts deleted unread. There was nothing left for me to say to him. My lawyer, a tough, efficient woman Judith had recommended, handled everything. The trial was a prolonged nightmare. I had to sit there, in the solemn courtroom, and tell my story, piece by piece, under the curious gaze of the public and the scrutiny of the lawyers. I had to face Chloe again. Even in a prison jumpsuit, she radiated an arrogant defiance. Her legal team tried to paint me as a paranoid old woman who had entrapped an innocent business consultant. But my evidence was too strong. The recordings, the draft emails, the financial documents, the testimony from Sam and Judith, and, most importantly, Michael's own confession. Faced with the irrefutable evidence and the prospect of a much harsher sentence, Michael broke. He took a plea deal, agreeing to testify against Chloe in exchange for a lighter sentence. I had to sit and listen as my son, on the witness stand, recounted the entire conspiracy, his voice trembling with a belated remorse. He cried. He said he had been manipulated by Chloe, that he never truly wanted me to die. Maybe part of that was true. Maybe he was just trying to save himself. I didn't know anymore. It didn't matter. In the end, justice was served, in its own dry, impersonal way. Chloe Sterling, her own criminal past brought to light, was convicted on a slew of charges, from conspiracy to commit murder and aggravated assault to fraud. Her sentence was life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the verdict was read, she looked at me across the courtroom, and in her gray eyes, I saw no remorse. I only saw failure. Michael, for his cooperation, received a lesser sentence, 15 years. I watched him being led away, his back slumped and pathetic. My successful, handsome son was gone, replaced by a broken man who had lost everything for a mad dream in Tuscany. I felt no satisfaction, only a deep, unending sadness, like a bottomless ocean. After the trial, I knew I couldn't go back to my old life. The house in Charleston, with all its memories, was now poisoned. Every room whispered of betrayal. I sold it, along with nearly everything in it. I kept only my books, my photographs of Henry, and a few small heirlooms from my parents. I needed a fresh start, a place with no ghosts, and I found it in Miami, a seemingly strange choice for a retired history professor. But I didn't need the quiet of the past anymore. I needed the vitality of the present. I bought a modern penthouse apartment with glass walls that looked out onto the endless blue sea and the vast sky. No ancient, moss-draped oaks, no creaking floors, just light, space, and the constant sound of the waves. A year passed. The wound in my soul began to scar over, though I knew it would never fully heal. I started writing, not about distant kings and battles. I wrote a book about the extraordinary women of the South, women who had quietly shaped history with their resilience and intellect. Writing became my therapy, a way to reclaim my own voice. I made new friends. I joined a book club, walked on the beach every morning. I learned to smile again, a real smile. Judith would fly down to visit sometimes, and we would sit on the balcony, drinking wine and talking about everything except that one terrible night. We didn't need to. It was always there, an unspoken understanding between us. One morning, the mail brought a letter. The postmark was from a federal prison in Florida. It was Michael's handwriting. My hand trembled as I held it. I hadn't had any contact with him since the trial. I was going to throw it away. But in the end, I opened it. The letter was short, the words scrawled on lined paper. "Mom," it began, "I don't know if you'll read this. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. Not a day goes by that I don't think about what I did. I was blinded by greed and arrogance. I destroyed everything. I destroyed our family, and I almost destroyed you. Chloe didn't create the monster in me. She just unleashed it. It was always there. I am so sorry. It's all I can say. I hope you've found peace. I love you." I read the letter several times. Tears began to fall, the first tears I had shed for him, and not for myself, since it all began. They weren't tears of forgiveness. Forgiveness might never come. They were tears of loss, of acknowledging an irredeemable tragedy. I didn't write back, but I didn't throw the letter away. I put it in a box with old keepsakes, a painful reminder of the fragility of love and the complexity of the human soul. That evening, I stood on my balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky and sea in fiery colors. The sea breeze blew gently through my hair. I was no longer Eleanor Vance, the victim, or Eleanor Vance, the survivor. I was simply Eleanor, a woman who had walked through hellfire and come out on the other side, not unscathed, but reborn. I had lost a son, a home, a life. But I had found myself. I had found a strength I never knew I possessed, a resilience forged in the crucible of adversity. I had learned that even in the darkest of nights, there is always the possibility of a new dawn. I raised my wineglass to the fiery horizon. I wasn't toasting the past that was gone. I was toasting the future that was yet to be written, the blank pages waiting for me to fill them. Standing here, on this breezy balcony, looking out at the endless ocean, I often reflect on the strange paths life has taken me. I spent my entire career studying history, the repeating patterns of power and betrayal, analyzing the fall of empires from the safe distance of time. I never imagined I would have to live through my own miniature war, a civil war fought not on a battlefield, but in the familiar hallways of my own home, with an enemy who wore the face of my only son. Trust, I once thought, was the unshakable foundation of love, especially a mother's love. I had given Michael my unconditional trust, seeing it as a gift, a legacy, but I now understand that trust isn't a static state. It's a living thing, one that needs to be nurtured with honesty and tested by action. Blind trust isn't a virtue. It's an open invitation for betrayal. I've learned that loving someone deeply doesn't mean you must surrender your right to question. your right to protect yourself. Vigilance isn't the enemy of love. Sometimes it's its silent guardian. We often imagine evil as a powerful, formidable force, like the image of Chloe Sterling with her ice-cold eyes and ruthless plans. But I've come to realize a harder truth. Evil often doesn't need its own strength, it only needs to find and exploit the weakness in others. Michael wasn't born a monster. He was a weak man, weak to greed, weak to his own insecurities, weak to the temptation of an easy way out. Chloe didn't create the darkness inside him, she simply turned on the lights, and his weakness willingly danced to her tune. The truly terrifying evil isn't the one that roars, but the one that whispers, using the cracks in our souls to plant the seeds of destruction. And perhaps the most important lesson I learned came from my enemy's own mistake. Throughout this ordeal, my greatest weapon was the very thing they gave me. They underestimated me. They looked at me and saw only an old woman, a widow, a retired professor, a fading entity, easily pushed aside, a footnote in their own grand story. They failed to see the decades of accumulated experience, the mind sharpened by thousands of books and countless other lives. They failed to see the resilience of a woman who had lived through loss and pain and was still standing. The invisibility they imposed upon me became my cloak. It allowed me to move, to observe, and to plan right under their noses. They were too preoccupied with their own arrogance to see the power that was quietly rising from what they perceived as weakness. And that is a philosophy I will carry with me for the rest of my days. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Never mistake kindness for weakness or age for obsolescence. Because in the most tranquil gardens, you sometimes find the strongest roots, capable of shaking the very ground. I did not choose this fight. It found me. But when it came, I fought with the tools life had given me, my intellect, my patience, and a deep understanding of human nature. I survived not by becoming like my enemies, but by becoming the truest version of myself. And that, perhaps, is the greatest victory of all. Not the victory over Michael or Chloe, but Eleanor Vance's victory over the darkness, and finding her own light in the process. Thank you for listening to my whole story. If it resonated with you in any way, I hope you'll like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss what comes next. And please, don't forget to leave your thoughts, your perspective, or your own story in the comments below so we can all connect and share with one another.